Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into Ezekiel, the 30th chapter. And pretty much like in this chapter, as well as in the 29th chapter, the Lord had Ezekiel pronounce judgment against Egypt. And the things that he was going to do to Egypt, namely by the hands of the Babylonians. Now in Ezekiel, the 30th chapter, mainly when you read it historically, this is something that the Lord did bring upon ancient Egypt by the hand of the Babylonians. But there are also certain parts in this chapter, certain verses that can also be thought of prophetically, understanding that there are times when Egypt is referred to, or America is referred to prophetically as Egypt. You may read certain scriptures, i.e. 2nd Ezra 15, Isaiah 19, even in Revelation 11, it sort of makes that distinction there where America is referred to as Egypt. Okay, so there are certain parts in here that, though this did happen historically, can be thought of prophetically as well, and it's important to be able to identify those parts in there. Okay, so let's go through it. This is the book of Ezekiel chapter 30 verse 1, and as you can see, the title, Lament over Egypt. The word of the Lord Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, how ye woe worth the day. And keep in mind, right, when the Lord is telling Ezekiel to prophesy, he's basically telling Ezekiel to proclaim these things before they happen, because that's what a prophecy is. Like when you prophesy, you're saying whatever it is that's about to happen before it happens. And in this case, it's judgment against Egypt. So it says here, woe worth the day, all right, meaning that it's going to be a very bad time for whoever this prophecy is going to be against, which we know is Egypt. Verse 3, for the day is near, even the day of the Lord Yahweh is near. A cloudy day, it shall be the time of the heathen. Now, we know that, there are oftentimes, there are certain precepts when you read about, whenever you hear or think about the day of the Lord, you think more so about this time of destruction, okay, where the Lord is going to bring the time of Jacob's trouble and ultimately the destruction by way of those thermonuclear missiles. Okay, and as it says here, a cloudy day, right, which is synonymous with, I believe, Joel, the 2nd chapter, it shall be the time of the heathen, because that's when the heathen are going to be judged. Now, at this time, when the Lord was bringing judgment, this day of the Lord, represented like when the Lord's going to bring judgment upon the Egyptians then, but also in this time, okay, as you read of prophetically, we're in the ultimate, like the definitive day of the Lord, where the Lord is going to bring ultimate judgment upon all these heathens, okay, which is why primarily he is having them gathered over there in the place of his judgment, right? Jehoshaphat, which is over there in what today is called the Middle East. Verse 4, and the sword shall come upon Egypt, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia, when the slain shall fall in Egypt, and they shall take away her multitude, and her foundations shall be broken down. Now, once again, like I said, this did happen to the ancient Egyptians. There's like I said, sources on both sides, right? Some say that that we don't have any definitive secular proof to back this up, but as we know, we go based off of the biblical first. Secular is a good, nice to have, but secular history does not validate the scriptures, meaning the scriptures don't depend on secular history to validate it. Okay, and that's really where the aspect of faith comes in, and that's where these so-called Christian scholars and historians, that's where they luck out, because they depend on secular history to build their, understanding of the scriptures. But without faith, you cannot fully understand the scriptures. And that's why it tells you, I think in the book of Timothy or so, ever learning, but never able to come to the, to the fullness of the truth. So they would only gain so much understanding, but the rest, where you actually require faith to understand it, they won't be able to get that. So this did happen, right? The Babylonians came, they did destruction, but also we know that something similar is going to happen to this modern day Egypt, which is America. Right now, keep in mind, when you read, like, even when you read in the book of Isaiah 19, when it's talking about America and is referred to as Egypt, it refers to Egypt. It mentions Egypt, or it mentions these like different cities and capitals and regions that are actually in ancient Egypt. Okay, but those are all representative of America. So keep in mind that you're not going to see a scripture that tells you, oh, New York City or New Jersey, because these terms did not exist at the time that this vision was received. Okay, but we also know that the foundations of this place are also going to be broken down and destroyed. Verse 5, Ethiopia and Libya and Lydia and all the mingled people, and Chub and the men of the land that is in league. And when you look up the word Chub, they they don't give too much on it, but it goes into like a neighboring region over there in near Egypt that was sort of in league with them. Okay, so basically Ethiopia, Libya, Lydia, the mingled people, these were all of them that were in league or connected to Egypt, and henceforth they were also going to suffer the judgment, as it says, the men of the land that is in league shall fall with them by the sword. So when the Lord sent the Babylonians over there, basically they didn't spare. Thus saith the Lord, they also that uphold Egypt shall fall, and the pride of her power shall come down. From the tower of Syene shall they fall in it by the sword, saith the Lord Yahweh. And they shall be desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities shall be in the midst of the cities that are wasted. Yeah, because their cities were overrun, the people were slain. Okay, but also guess what? What the prophetically, right? If you think about this in a prophetic sense, identifying Egypt with America, what's going to happen to this place is also going to be made desolate. Okay, except the desolation of this modern day Egypt is going to be ultimately by thermonuclear fire, along with the fire from the heavens when the Lord makes his return. Verse 8, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh when I have set a fire in Egypt, see, like we just mentioned, and when all her helpers shall be destroyed. Now back then, obviously, when those armies came in there and they destroyed the place, and you get a bit more context in the previous chapter, right? Because that chapter is also pronouncing judgment against Egypt. They destroyed their cities and so on and so forth. Guess what? Those that were joined or allied with Egypt they also got the work. In that day shall messengers go forth from me in ships to make the careless Ethiopians afraid, and great pain shall come upon them as in the day of Egypt, for lo, it cometh. So basically the Lord's saying here, as this judgment is going forth, them Ethiopians are not going to escape either, right? That whole region up in there in northern Africa, they're gonna all suffer this as well. So as Egypt gets destroyed, word is gonna spread to the Ethiopians, because they're also gonna get attacked. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I will also make the multitude of Egypt to cease by the hand of Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon. Okay, and like I said, certain parts of this we know. Obviously, this judgment the Lord was pronouncing against Egypt, we know that this eventually came to pass. Okay, and Egypt and Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar being the king of Babylon, the ruler at the time, the Lord had sent him not only against Egypt, right? He sent him against Moab and Ammon. Okay, and the Lord also pronounced judgment against Edom, against Lebanon, Tyre, against Israel. So basically, all those nations over there in the region known as the Levant were subjected, okay, under the authority of the Babylonians. The Lord used Nebuchadnezzar as a tool to come against them. So as it's saying here, I will also make the multitude of Egypt to cease by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Here is spelled Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He and his people with him, the terrible of the nations, shall be brought to destroy the land, and they shall draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. And I will make the rivers dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked. And I will make the land waste and all that is therein. So the Lord is basically saying he's going to give them Egyptians into the hand of these Babylonians when they came over. By the hand of strangers, I, the Lord Yahweh, have spoken it. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I will also destroy the idols, and I will cause their images to cease out of Noph. And the images is synonymous with their idols. Okay, out of Noph, and there shall be no more a prince in the land of Egypt, and I will put fear in the land of Egypt. And I will make Pathros desolate, and I will set fire in Zoan, and I will execute judgments in No, which these are, when you look them up, these are basically like different cities and regions. I believe they identify No with Thebes, okay, but over there in Egypt, okay, which, like I said, if you think about this prophetically, these cities that are referred to as like Pathros and Noph and so on and so forth, it's spiritual how the Lord brought judgment against ancient Egypt and mentioned about setting fire in these cities, because ultimately what's going to happen here as well is the Lord is going to set fire in these cities, this modern day Egyptian cities as well. And like I make reference to, you can read Isaiah the 19th chapter, as that also goes into judgment against this place. Verse 15, it says, and I will pour my fury upon Sin, the strength of Egypt, and I will cut off the multitude of No. And I will set fire in Egypt. Sin shall have great pain, and No shall be rent asunder. Asunder meaning like divided apart, which is just a metaphorical way of saying that, you know, they're gonna be destroyed. And when I say destroyed, I don't mean that, you know, like there's gonna be like some, you know, they're gonna just completely be obliterated, nothing left. And Noph shall have distresses daily. The young men of Aven and Pibeseth shall fall by the sword, and these cities shall go into captivity. And ultimately, that's what ended up happening. Right after they were taken over, they were taken captives, just like all these other regions that were taken over. They were always captives taken out of them. Now, obviously, you wouldn't take out every single person from the land. If you were an empire that was ruling or reigning at the time, you're not going to take out every single individual out of the land. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, in order to expand your empire, you take out those that are useful to you, but you leave some of the rest in there, and then you put them under subjection, i.e. you set up somebody over. So I believe it was either the Greeks or the Persians that had satraps. All right, and I think the Greeks called them tyrants or so. The point is, you would have certain people that would be in charge over these regions that are subject onto you. Like and the Romans had different consuls of different regions, right? So it doesn't make sense for you to go and completely take out everybody from this one land when they can better serve you by having them be captive over there and be subject onto you. So they took out those that were important, like they did with Daniel and the 3 holy children, and ultimately Ezekiel and so on and so forth. And then they left, you know, some also in there. Very few, but still some. Verse 18, at Tahaphanes also the day shall be darkened, when I shall break there the yokes of Egypt, and the pomp of her strength shall cease in her. And the pomp meaning like that pride, that, you know, puffed up energy is going to cease, because they're going to be brought down, they're going to be abased. As for her, a cloud shall cover her, and her daughters shall go into captivity. And that's a metaphorical way of saying their cities. Okay, if you have like a country, like if you have, for example, they call the United States of America, you can think of the states as like the different daughters, or, you know, of this country. Or on the lower level, maybe like the cities in the state. Okay, nevertheless, it's not talking about the physical daughters exclusively, right? Because does it make sense for the Babylonians to come take down Egypt and they say, we're just going to take your daughters into captivity. We're going to leave the sons and the fathers and the mothers here in the land. No. Verse 19, thus will I execute judgments in Egypt, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Right? As I brought out that precept, I forgot which chapter it was in, but there's a precept in the book of Psalms where it says the Lord is known by the judgments which he executeth. So if you notice, whenever the Lord is speaking to these prophets and he's telling them, say X, Y, and Z and pronounce judgment, he always includes, they shall know that I am the Lord. Because the Lord is known in the judgments which he executeth. So when the Lord brings it to pass, the world is going to know and understand this was done by Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai. And that's going to put the fear of the Lord back into earth, especially in these times. I mean, people have no idea how devastating the day of the Lord is going to be. And in fact, it's going to have to be so to set that global reset, in righteousness again. So now we get to the second part of this. It says victory for Babylon, Ezekiel 30 and 20. And it came to pass in the 11th year. Now, when we were reading above, this was, let me see if it mentioned when the word of the Lord came on to him. Okay, so it doesn't mention per se when the word of the Lord came on to Ezekiel here in the first verse. But as we continue in verse 20, and it came to pass in the 11th year, in the first month, in the 7th day of the month, that the word of the Lord Yahweh came on to me, saying. Now, if you notice, whenever you're hearing about time, a date in the scriptures, you don't hear on January 3rd, 1978, or on the 7th day of the month, right, on a Sunday afternoon of January. No, that way of identifying time was not used back then. Back then, time was told based on the ultimate, clock, which was the moon. So that's why you would hear from on the 11th year. So typically this would be like, sometimes they would use a starting point of some event that happened. So maybe the 11th year, after the captivity, after they were taken into captivity in whatever region. And then they'll go on, right? The first month of that year, the 7th day of that month. That's basically how they told time or described the date of when something happened. Because there was no Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. There was none of that. There was the understanding that there were 7 days in a month, in a week, okay? But there wasn't a Monday, Tuesday. So when people say, for example, when it comes to, now I'll get right back to the topic here, but when people talk about things like the Sabbath, and they say the Sabbath, remember the law of the Sabbath was given back all those thousands of years ago. And they weren't using Fridays and Saturdays and Mondays and Tuesdays. That concept was not there. So when people go today and say the Sabbath is a Friday sundown to Saturday sundown every single week of every month of the year, how can you substantiate that with the scriptures when you won't find the word Friday in the Bible at all? Or Saturday, or Sunday, or Monday. You won't find any of those so-called weekdays or weekend names in the Bible. So when they said that this day was a Sabbath, how do you know this day wasn't a Wednesday or a Monday or a Sunday? Anyway, verse 21. Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and lo, it shall not be bound up to be healed. Now, one thing to keep in mind is in the majority of these chapters in the book of Ezekiel, right? When we first started off, Ezekiel was taken captive, and the Lord came to him, showed him, the chariots, the angels, and then the Lord started to speak through Ezekiel, right? But first, the Lord spoke to him concerning the wickedness that was going on in Jerusalem, in Israel. The Lord explained to him over, many times, the wickedness. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing. To the point where the Lord even showed Ezekiel what they were doing over there in Jerusalem and how wicked it was. And why was the Lord doing that? So Ezekiel could bear witness that when the Lord brings the judgment, which he also told Ezekiel that he would do against Jerusalem, that it wasn't going to be that he was just being unrighteous or he was just unreasonable, but it was justified. It was warranted because of their behavior. So the Lord, that covers like a good large portion of the first few chapters of the book of Ezekiel. But then you move on to where the Lord is now pronouncing judgment against the neighboring nations, right? About Ammon and Moab and so on, Syria and Tyre and all these different regions, Edom. Okay. And now we're dealing with Egypt. But the most, sometimes these chapters, they're pretty much just conveying a basic message. When I say basic, I mean the concept is not like rocket science. It's really the Lord just pronouncing the judgments that he's going to bring on these nations. But it's not always that the Lord will speak straightforward. So that's why you'll hear, like I believe in the previous chapter, the Lord was speaking about bringing judgment, but then he sort of worded it in a way as if likening Pharaoh to like this sea monster in the body of water that's going to be casted out like a fish out of water. So that's in other words, he's saying he's going to bring destruction upon them, but he's just worded it in this metaphorical way. And that's often how you'll see a lot of the way the judgments are pronounced in these chapters in the book of Ezekiel. So it's really straightforward. You just need to be able to relate the analogical comparison to like what it actually means. So verse 21, continuing, Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and lo, it shall not be bound up to be healed, to put a roller to bind it, to make it strong to hold the sword. So what the Lord is basically saying here, right? When you break somebody's arm, you almost like disable them. You make them weak. So in so many words, that's what the Lord is saying here. I've made them weak, right? When you hear breaking Pharaoh's arm, not saying that he magically sent an angel overnight and then Pharaoh woke up and his left arm or his right arm was broken. And as it says here, it shall not be bound up to be healed, right? When you break your arm, what do? They put it in like a cast, right? Or they put it in a certain position and you give it time so it can heal. But the Lord is saying here, I've broken it. It's not going to have that ability to be healed so that it can be strong because I want to make him weak. Verse 22, therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and I will break his arms, the strong and that which was broken. So I already broke one, and then I'm going to break the other one. So both the working arm and the broken arm, they're both going to be broken. So now he's going to be completely defenseless. And I will cause the sword to fall out of his hand. And what's the Lord saying here? That he's gonna basically make Egypt defenseless against the Babylonians when he sends them. Verse 23, and I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and will disperse them through the countries, right? By way of captivity and by way of some of them fleeing. But that's a representation of them going down, right? If you have to flee or you're being taken out of your land, that means that you're falling. Verse 24, and I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon and put my sword in his hand, but I will break Pharaoh's arms, and he shall groan before him with the groanings of a deadly wounded man. Once again, metaphorically, right? If you break somebody's arms, they're going to scream in pain, right? Like somebody who's been wounded. But here what the Lord is saying is that I'm going to weaken them. I'm going to make them defenseless. Because remember, the Lord is the one that decides who the victor of the battle is. It doesn't matter how many armies or troops that you have. The Most High is the one who decides who gets the victory. Here he's saying, I'm going to give the victory to the king of Babylon. Okay, verse 25, but I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon. And the arm meaning like power, right? Power, control. The arms of Pharaoh shall fall down, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh, when I shall put my sword into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall stretch it out upon the land of Egypt. And that's a metaphorical sword, meaning the judgment. So the Lord is going to use the Babylonians to bring judgment upon the Egyptians, and he's going to make sure they're successful at it. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, and disperse them among the countries, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. And that's pretty much the end of the book of Ezekiel, the 30th chapter. So with that, Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.